I didn't know I was signing away my entire life. I thought it was a medical consent form. A routine paper. Something to help the doctors save me. I was lying in an ICU bed, barely conscious, tubes in my arms, machines breathing for me. And that single signature destroyed everything I owned. My name is Thomas Reynolds. I'm 69 years old. And this is the story of how one paper signed in the ICU allowed my own family to take my house, my savings, and my dignity, while I was still alive. Before you see what happens next in my life, subscribe to this channel. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from, your city or country. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, share your story. You're not alone. I spent my entire life being careful. Careful with money. Careful with people. Careful with promises. I worked as an electrical contractor for over 40 years. Long days. Dangerous jobs. No shortcuts. I built a small but successful business from nothing. Just my hands, my knowledge, and my reputation. My wife, Margaret, handled the books. I handled the work. Together, we built a life that wasn't flashy, but it was solid. The house was paid off. The business had steady clients. The savings were enough for a peaceful retirement. I trusted my family because, why wouldn't I? Then one morning, everything went black. A massive heart attack. I remember pain. Voices shouting. Lights rushing past. When I woke up, I was in the ICU. Machines beeped. My mouth was dry. My body felt like it didn't belong to me anymore. The doctor said I was lucky to be alive. That luck didn't last. My family surrounded my bed. My son. My daughter. My brother-in-law. They looked worried. Supportive. Loving. Someone placed papers on a clipboard in my shaky hand. They said, "Dad, this is just standard hospital stuff." I couldn't read properly. My vision was blurry. My hands were weak. I asked what it was. They said, "Just authorization. In case something happens." I trusted them. I signed. That signature felt heavy, but I thought it was fear, not betrayal. I stayed in the hospital for weeks. Recovery was slow. Painful. Humiliating. When I was finally discharged, my son said I should stay at his place. For a while. He said my house needed repairs. Said it wouldn't be safe yet. I believed him. A month passed. Then another. Every time I asked about going home, there was an excuse. Paperwork. Insurance. Timing. One day, I asked to see my bank account. My son smiled and said, "Don't worry, Dad. We're managing everything." That word again. Managing. I asked for details. He said I shouldn't stress. It wasn't good for my heart. That's when I felt it. That quiet panic. I called my bank myself. They told me my accounts were under temporary control of a power of attorney. I asked who had it. They said my son. I had never given him that. Or so I thought. Then the truth hit me. That paper in the ICU. It wasn't medical. It was legal. A durable power of attorney. Signed while I was barely conscious. I asked to see my house. My daughter avoided my eyes and said, "We sold it." Just like that. Sold. They said it was necessary. Said I needed money for medical care. Said the market was good. They didn't ask me. They didn't even tell me until it was done. My business was gone too. Transferred. Closed. Clients reassigned. Everything I built, handed away with a pen I couldn't even hold properly. I wasn't confused. I wasn't incompetent. But legally, I was powerless. And the worst part? They kept telling me it was for my own good. That's when I realized something terrifying. I didn't just survive a heart attack. I survived long enough to watch my own family erase me. And I knew one thing for sure. If I didn't fight back now, I would disappear completely. The first night I realized I no longer owned my own life, I couldn't sleep. Not because of pain. Not because of fear of dying. But because I was wide awake, and completely powerless. I was staying in my son's guest room. A room with no photos. No memories. No history. Just clean walls and a quiet reminder that I didn't belong there. I asked again to see the paperwork. My son said, "Dad, doctors said stress could kill you." Funny how concern always appeared right when I asked questions. The next morning, I called a lawyer. Or at least I tried to. My phone had been misplaced. They said it must have been lost during my hospital transfer. Instead, they handed me a new phone. Already set up. Already logged in. Contacts missing? Including every lawyer I had ever known. That wasn't an accident. I waited until everyone left the house and used the landline. The attorney listened quietly as I explained everything. The ICU. The signature. The power of attorney. The house sale. When I finished, there was a long pause. Then he said, "Mr. Reynolds. This happens more often than people think." That sentence chilled me. More often than people think. He explained that a durable power of attorney, once activated, gives enormous control, especially if signed during a medical emergency. I asked him the one question that mattered. "Can I get my life back?" He said, "Only if we move fast." Speed was not on my side. The house was already sold. The business accounts were emptied and closed. My medical condition was being used as justification for every decision. The attorney told me we needed to prove two things. 1. That I was not mentally capable at the time of signing. 2. That my family knew that. Intent. That's where it gets dangerous. A few days later, my daughter sat me down. She spoke gently. Soft voice. Practiced concern. "Dad, the lawyer you called contacted us," she said. "We think it's a mistake." "A mistake?" I asked her why. She said, "If this turns into a legal fight, it could get ugly." "Ugly for who?" She slid a document across the table. A care agreement. It stated I would live with them permanently. My finances would remain under their control. I'd receive a monthly allowance. Allowance. Like a child. I asked what would happen if I didn't sign. She looked at me for a long moment and said, "Then we'll have no choice but to protect you, legally." That was a threat. Wrapped in a smile. That night, I packed a small bag. Clothes. Documents I secretly copied. My old watch. I waited until everyone was asleep and called a cab. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay there. I checked into a small motel on the edge of town. Nothing fancy. But it was mine. The lawyer met me the next morning. In person. He reviewed the ICU form carefully. He pointed to a section I'd never seen. A checkbox indicating, "Patient fully alert and oriented." It was checked. I wasn't. I remembered that day clearly. I couldn't lift my arm without help. I couldn't focus my eyes. I barely knew where I was. Someone lied. The lawyer requested hospital footage. Security cameras. Nurse logs. Medication records. The records showed I had been heavily sedated. Morphine. Blood pressure stabilizers. Sedatives. I should never have been signing anything. Then we uncovered something worse. The document wasn't prepared by the hospital. It was prepared by a private attorney. Hired. By my family. Before my heart attack. That timing mattered. We filed an emergency motion to suspend the power of attorney. My family responded immediately. They claimed I was confused. That I was being manipulated by outsiders. That my sudden independence was dangerous. Dangerous. Because I wanted my own money. The judge ordered a temporary hearing. I walked into that courtroom weaker than I'd ever been physically, but clearer than I'd ever been mentally. My son sat across from me. He wouldn't meet my eyes. The judge asked him one simple question. Why was a legal power of attorney prepared before the medical emergency? My son said it was. Just in case. The judge asked another. Why was it executed while Mr. Reynolds was sedated? Silence. That silence was loud. The judge issued a temporary suspension. My accounts were frozen. Not under my son. Under the court. That meant one thing. They no longer controlled me. My family's tone changed overnight. Calls turned polite. Messages turned respectful. They suddenly wanted to talk things through. I didn't respond. Because I had learned something important. The moment you regained control, people revealed their real intentions. The investigation expanded. The house sale was flagged. The business transfer was questioned. The attorney who prepared the document was subpoenaed. And then, something unexpected happened. A nurse from the ICU contacted my lawyer. She remembered me. She remembered that day. She remembered arguing with someone in my room about whether I was alert enough to sign. That testimony could change everything. For the first time since the heart attack, I felt hope. Not weak hope. Solid hope. Because the truth was finally louder than their story. And they knew it. That's when they stopped pretending this was about my health. And started preparing to protect themselves. By the time the nurse agreed to testify, my family had already shifted from confidence to damage control. They stopped calling me Dad in messages. Started using my full name. That alone told me everything. The nurse's name was Angela. She'd been working ICU for over 15 years. She remembered faces. She remembered situations. And she remembered mine, because she'd argued with my daughter that afternoon. Angela stated clearly that I was not alert, not oriented, and not capable of understanding legal documents when the paper was placed in my hand. She documented it in her notes. Those notes had been buried, but not erased. The hospital released the medication timeline, the sedation chart, the vital signs. All of it matched my memory. I was barely awake. My lawyer filed to void the power of attorney entirely. My family responded with something desperate. They filed a motion claiming I was now being manipulated by my lawyer and that my sudden independence was evidence of cognitive instability. Imagine that. The moment I stood up for myself became proof. According to them, that I couldn't be trusted. The judge wasn't amused. He ordered an independent cognitive evaluation. Again. This one took an entire day. Memory. Judgment. Financial reasoning. Risk awareness. I didn't rush. I didn't argue. I answered calmly. At the end, the evaluator looked at me and said, Mr. Reynolds, you are fully competent. Your distress is situational, not cognitive. Those words felt like being handed my name back. Meanwhile, the investigation into the house sale deepened. Turns out the buyer wasn't a stranger. It was an LLC. Registered to my brother-in-law. Purchased below market value. Resold weeks later, for a profit. That wasn't caregiving. That was theft. The business records showed the same pattern. Client lists transferred. Equipment sold quickly. Accounts closed with no reinvestment. Money didn't disappear. It moved. Into places I was never meant to see. The court consolidated everything into one hearing. Capacity. Coercion. Financial exploitation. My family hired a new legal team. Expensive. Aggressive. They came after my credibility. They asked about my age. My heart condition. My grief. They suggested I was emotional. The judge stopped them. Emotion does not equal incompetence, he said. That sentence echoed through the room. Then Angela testified. She spoke calmly. Professionally. She explained the medications. The dosage. My state. She said something that silenced the room. I refused to witness the signature, she said. Because he wasn't capable. The document showed 2 witness signatures. Neither was medical staff. Both were family. That mattered. The attorney who drafted the power of attorney finally testified. Under oath. He admitted my son had contacted him weeks before my heart attack. They discussed future planning. They discussed contingencies. They discussed full control if necessary. Necessary. The judge leaned back and asked one final question. Did you advise executing this document while the patient was sedated? The attorney hesitated. Then said, I advised waiting. They did not. That was it. The judge ruled the power of attorney invalid and void ab initio. From the beginning. Which meant everything done under it was now illegal. Accounts seized. Transactions reversed. Assets frozen. My family's faces changed. Fear replaced strategy. The court ordered full forensic accounting and referred the case to the district attorney. Criminal investigation. The word hung heavy. At recess, my daughter approached me. Tears in her eyes. She said, We were just trying to protect you. I looked at her and said quietly, You don't protect someone by stealing their life. She stepped back like I'd struck her. That night, alone in my motel room, I finally cried. Not from pain. From release. Because for the first time since the ICU, the truth was louder than their lies. But the fight wasn't over. The district attorney's office requested interviews. They explained potential charges. Elder exploitation. Fraud. Forgery-related conspiracy. They asked if I wanted to proceed. I didn't answer immediately. I thought about my wife. My children as kids. The life I believed we had. Then I thought about that ICU bed. About a pen placed in my hand while I couldn't even lift my head. And I said yes. Because silence would have made me complicit. Negotiations started fast. My family offered to return money. To settle quietly. To keep it out of court. They said it would tear the family apart. I said the family was already torn. The moment they chose greed over my life. The DA moved forward. Charges were drafted. Court date set. The house sale was reversed. I walked through my front door again weeks later. Empty. Furniture gone. Walls bare. But it was mine. I stood in the living room and realized something powerful. They had taken everything. But they hadn't taken me. And now, they were the ones who would have to answer for it. Walking back into my own house felt strange. Not comforting. Not joyful. Just quiet. Every room echoed. The couch Linda picked out was gone. The dining table where we shared 30 years of meals had been sold. Even the curtains were missing. They didn't just take ownership. They erased presence. The forensic accountant's report arrived 2 weeks later. It was thick. Detailed. Merciless. Unauthorized transfers totaling hundreds of thousands. Rapid liquidation of assets at below-market prices. Kickback patterns disguised as service fees. The report didn't use emotional words. It didn't have to. Numbers don't lie. The district attorney filed formal charges. Elder financial exploitation. Fraud. Conspiracy. Seeing those words next to my children's names felt unreal. My lawyer asked how I was holding up. I told him the truth. I feel like I'm attending my own funeral and watching who shows up. Friends I hadn't heard from in months suddenly called. Relatives who stayed silent wanted to check in. A few even suggested I should drop the charges. For the sake of peace. Peace. Funny how peace is always suggested to the person who was hurt. The arraignment was quick. My son pleaded not guilty. My daughter followed. My brother-in-law avoided eye contact. Bail conditions were set. No contact with me. No access to financial systems. No interference with witnesses. For the first time since the ICU, I felt safe. The civil case moved alongside the criminal one. The court ordered rescission of the house sale and restoration of business assets where possible. Some things were gone forever. Clients had moved on. Equipment was sold and resold. Time couldn't be refunded. But the core remained: ownership, control, truth. Mediation was proposed. Their attorney suggested a global settlement. Money returned. Public apology avoided. Criminal charges reduced. I asked one question: "Does the settlement include accountability?" They said it included closure. I declined. Because closure without truth is just silence with better branding. The trial dates were set. During discovery, more messages surfaced. Voice notes, texts, emails. One message from my son stopped me cold. "If he doesn't make it, this all becomes easier." He was talking about me. While I was still in the ICU. The judge allowed it into evidence. Intent was no longer theoretical. It was documented. The pressure fractured the family completely. My daughter tried to negotiate separately. My brother-in-law's lawyer pushed for immunity. My son doubled down. He claimed I was doing this out of revenge. I wasn't. Revenge wants pain. I wanted acknowledgement. The trial began on a Monday. The courtroom was full. Not with drama. With consequence. The prosecution laid out the timeline. Pre-planning before the heart attack. Document execution during sedation. Rapid asset transfer. Profiting through shell entities. Witness after witness confirmed the pattern. Angela testified again. So did the forensic accountant. So did the attorney who drafted the document. Each testimony narrowed the space my family could hide in. When it was my turn, I stood slowly. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I just told the truth. I trusted them, I said. I trusted them because I raised them. Because I loved them. Because I believed family meant protection, not opportunity. The defense tried to paint me as bitter. The prosecutor asked one final question. "What did you lose?" I answered without hesitation. "My sense of safety. My home. My dignity." The jury deliberated for 2 days. Those were the longest 2 days of my life. I sat alone in my empty house and waited. No television. No radio. Just quiet. On the third morning, the call came. A verdict had been reached. I put on my jacket, looked at myself in the mirror, and realized something. No matter what they decided, I had already taken my life back. The courtroom was silent when the jury returned. I could hear my own breathing. The clerk stood. The foreperson unfolded the paper. On the first count, guilty. On the second, guilty. On the third, guilty. Each word landed heavy. My son stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. My daughter broke down halfway through the reading. My brother-in-law sank into his chair like the floor had given up on him. The judge thanked the jury and set sentencing for a later date. I didn't feel triumph. I felt finished. Like a storm had finally passed, leaving behind wreckage and clean air at the same time. In the civil ruling that followed, the court ordered full restitution. Accounts were restored. Remaining assets returned. Liens placed to recover what couldn't be immediately repaid. The house was legally mine again. So was the business, what was left of it. But ownership on paper doesn't automatically restore a life. Sentencing day came quietly. No speeches. No drama. My son received prison time for elder exploitation and fraud. My brother-in-law took a plea deal and lost his professional license. My daughter received probation, restitution obligations, and mandatory counseling. When it was over, the judge looked at me. "I hope this court has returned some measure of justice to you, Mr. Reynolds." I nodded. Justice had done its part. Now it was my turn. I moved back into the house alone. I didn't try to recreate the past. I repainted the walls. Donated what reminded me too much of what was gone. Bought new furniture, simple, functional. I reopened the business, smaller this time. No employees. No expansion plans. Just honest work, 3 days a week. Enough. Neighbors treated me differently. Not with pity. With respect. They had watched the trial. Read the articles. Heard the truth. Some apologized for not stepping in sooner. I told them it wasn't their burden. Betrayal hides best behind family names. One evening, months later, I sat on the porch as the sun went down. The house was quiet, but not empty. I felt something I hadn't felt since before the heart attack. Peace. Not the kind that forgets. The kind that understands. My children tried to reach out through attorneys. Letters asking for forgiveness. Messages about family. Promises of change. I read them. Then I filed them away. Forgiveness, I learned, isn't reconciliation. You can forgive without reopening the door. I changed my estate plan completely. Independent trustees. Medical advocates unrelated by blood. Clear safeguards. I also began speaking, quietly, at senior centers and community groups. Not as a warning filled with fear, but with clarity. I told them this. If someone rushes you to sign when you're weakest, pause. If someone says trust me but avoids details, pause. And if someone uses love as pressure, that's not love. People thanked me afterward. Some cried. Some asked for referrals. That's when I understood something important. What happened to me wasn't rare. It was just rarely challenged. I still miss the idea of the family I thought I had. But I no longer grieve the people they became. My life didn't end in that ICU bed. It restarted. With clearer eyes. Stronger boundaries. And a deeper respect for my own worth. I signed one paper in the ICU. And lost everything. But I fought back awake. And this time, I signed nothing. Without reading every single word.